Hey, it's Tommy Allen from TommyAllenMusic.com. Welcome. This week we have Stephen Steinhaus. Let's get to it. So thank you, Stephen, for giving your evening up and coming and having a chat.
No, man. Thanks for having me. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
So, born in Chicago. What year was you born?
73.
73, okay. And what is your earliest childhood musical memory?
My earliest childhood musical memory. Well, Greetings from Asbury Park was released on the day I was born. So I'll throw that one in there. And Superstition by Stevie Wonder was number one on the day I was born. So that kind of construct. My earliest memories probably church music, sort of sacred music would be my earliest memory. Hymns and such, or actually my grandmother was in the choir at her Lutheran church, so it's probably that would be my earliest memory.
And how old were you been then?
3 or 4,
Blimey, okay. Did
I
you have
guess.
a lot of music in the Steinhaus?
In the Steinhaus house. Yeah, actually, I mean, as close as one could get in the west side and the western suburbs of Chicago. I was what would you call? I guess I was like a boy soprano. I could, despite my rather baritone bass timbers now. So in every school thing, I had to be the guy sing, oh, doing
Right,
that
okay.
bit. And my sister was trained in classical piano and taught herself guitar and classical guitar. My mom loved to sing but couldn't sing for toffee. And my old man had a hell of a voice, actually. And, I remember he would go down back in the days of Taste of Chicago and Chicago Fest, which were massive free festivals. Every year they'd either have the Temps or the Tops or both. And he'd always be singing the bass line to that. So I grew up around it, but nobody did it as a job or even as a proper hobby kind of thing.
Okay. And what did your dad do?
My dad was a teacher, like me, like my mom, like my grandmother. It kind of runs in the family. His old man was a trucker. He was a truck driver, and they moved from Nebraska to Chicago when he was 8. My dad was 8, so he always worked in the summer on the trucks, and then taught during the school year because we have a longer summer holiday in the States. So he would work. He wouldn't drive because Steinhaus males notoriously can't drive very well. But he would load the liquor trucks on the south side of Chicago. So he was loading the liquor trucks for places like Kingston Mines and Rosa's and all of those old blues clubs. That was his route for years and years and years. So I've got the body of a trucker, and I guess the mind of a teacher is how it's come to be.
And did you trace your family tree back to Germany then with the Steinhaus name?
Uh, yeah, there's my dad's mom's family were Kramers. So you had the Steinhauses and the Kramers, and they were farmers, both farming families, who had come via Canada, emigrated via Canada and down into the plains to work the land in the 1850s, something like that. And my mom's family is Italian. So my grandfather was Calabrese, good working class stock, and my grandmother was Sicilian. So somewhere in that mix, there's a little bit of Somerset. Somewhere on my grandmother's side, there was the Rodaways that were somehow connected to Cromwell. And so the old man and I have actually visited the little village in Somerset and found at least a Rodway, which was part of the Kramer line as well. So you can tell by my beard, there is a huge mix of mutt-like ethnicities that I got running through here.
And where did the love of Shakespeare come from then?
But when I was, actually very early on, I grew up my mom was in a sort of a religious cult, I guess. So I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music. I wasn't allowed to watch television unless it was sport, but I was allowed to read. And I picked up reading at a very early age, and it was just something I was very, very good at. And they had, like, in the public state library, they'd have reading competitions and things like that. And so I'd always get involved as a kid, and it became still is a real strength. So literature has always been kind of one of my things. And I walked into year 10, which is freshman in American speak, year 10 English. And my year 10 English teacher is a gentleman named Robert Carlson, who I'm friends with on Facebook. How about that? And he introduced me and introduced us to Romeo and Juliet, took us to see Hamlet. And then as I moved through secondary school, it just became something I enjoyed more and more. When I got to university, I was my specialist subject, like mastermind, I guess, was African American poetry of the Harlem Renaissance, so jazz and blues poetry. But I took this seminar on Shakespeare, and he became a very close friend and mentor to me. But a gentleman by the name of Michael Mullen was the professor leading the seminar. And I was playing American football at the time as well. And he had to do a report each week to the American football coaches. And he says, I was walking out of one of the lectures, and he said, we had just done the Boar's Head scene from Henry IV, Part 1, where Falstaff is joking with everybody, and they're in the pub, and they're doing the whole thing. And I'm walking out of the lecture hall, and he says, hey, do they call you Stein? I said, yeah, I'm Stephen Steinhaus. He said, I know who you are, but I keep getting these reports that I have to fill out about a guy named Stein. That's you, right? And I was like, yeah. And he says, you want to see what I wrote this week? And I was like, oh, Christ. Okay. And he said, thank God for Shakespeare, because I watched the match last weekend, and Stephen Steinhaus is a far better Shakespearean than he will ever be American footballer. And I was like, oh, thanks a lot, dude. That's great. And he says, look, when you figure it out and you realize that you were born to be a man of arts rather than a man of violence and a man of football, he says, come and talk to me. And of course, I'm like, yeah. What are you talking about? Walking around with my earring in and my combat boots and biker jacket and whatever. And about a year and a half later, I figured out this dude's right. And he said to me, if you're serious about Shakespeare, you apply to go and study and do a postgraduate study in England. So I applied for the Rhodes Scholarship, to Oxford, which I lost in the finals because I refused to answer a question about the Republican Party. Not much has changed. And I said, my response was, ask me about poetry, ask me about Shakespeare, ask me about blues music. Don't ask me about politics, because that's not why I'm going to England. And I thought that was a great answer. Turns out it was not a great answer. So I lost in the finals for that. I lost in the finals for another scholarship, but I got the Fulbright grant to do a year of postgraduate research at the Shakespeare Institute, which is based in Stratford-upon-Avon, but is run by the University of Birmingham. So that's how I ended up over here in 95, 96.
Right, okay. And what did you do there then?
I did an MPhil in Shakespeare Studies, which was on, at the time, under the national curriculum with year 9 exams and year 11 exams. Shakespeare was mandatory, so you had to study Shakespeare regardless if you were English as an additional language speaker, or if you had special educational needs and struggle with reading, whatever. Everybody had to do it. And so my take was, what was the best teaching happening in the country, particularly in urban multicultural areas, that helped kids navigate Shakespeare. And I wrote about some fantastic teachers and some fantastic schools, and that was my master's of philosophy and Shakespeare studies, which hasn't earned me any more money, but
did you do any acting with it?
Good. Yeah, so originally I came over, the plan was to come over here, do the degree, play rugby, which I did, and I wanted to do some acting because when I was at university, between the bands I was in and working the doors, I know, can you believe it? A guy my size, and my studies and American football, I never had time to do any acting. So I did a little bit of acting. There's somewhere floating around, there's a educational video on different scenes of Romeo and Juliet, and I punch somebody or do something like that, typecasting. And learned a lot about directing, which is something that has served me well as well, and got into the stage combat side of things. So I was here for a year, and it's changed my life because that's how I ended up back here.
Right, okay. And how old was you then when you come over?
So I came over 22, just finished university, wasn't going to play professional American football. Had the offer on the table to wrestle professionally through what was the old WCW, which was then absorbed into the WWF, which is now the WWE. Then came over here, and then moved back to the States when I was 23, and then moved back here when I was 27. So I've been here 20 years now. And
your partner, is she English or?
She is English by birth, but Scottish by blood. Yeah.
Okay. And did you meet her on the Shakespeare thing?
Well, I met her. We taught together at the same school.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but I got the job at that school as a director of performing arts, partially because of the Shakespeare background, which was, and partially because of the music background, because I could combine the two.
So when you come over, where was you musically? You started a band up, or you joined a band?
When I came over originally, I was still, I was still in the throes of full-on heavy metal, bang your head kind of thing, and there's still an element of me that is, I would say, quite a metalhead. And then when I moved to Hawaii, was in kind of a rock/hard rock band that did quite well. Mind you, there are only about 6 non-Hawaiian bands on the entire island. And then bits and pieces when I was living in San Francisco, but nothing really took. And then when I came back here in 2000, I joined a UK hardcore punk band out of Coventry called Set Against. Yeah! And would stalk around on stage in like sensei combat trousers and a vest and no shoes and just scream. And made, as you would probably guess, negative money doing that. But somebody saw me doing that and said, look, I've got this 8-piece rhythm and blues band.
So where's they jump from punk screaming to rhythm and blues?
Oh, come on. So he saw something, and I'm like, yeah. And he says, now I know you're a music fan, because I'm not a proper muso like you, Tommy, and like most of the people that you interview on this show, I'm a fan. I grew up going, my dad used to take me to the Chicago Blues Festival when I was a little kid. That's how I kind of came at it, and then came at it because I was working the doors and working security at festivals and venues and things like that. So I'm like, yeah, well, because he said, I want your opinion on the band. And I went to see the band, and I gave him some blunt feedback on it. I said, I can see the potential. They played a gig at the Royal Shakespeare Company, again, Shakespeare in Stratford. I said, I can see the potential. Here's what I would do if I was you. And then I didn't hear from him again. And then August of 2001, he said, look, I need a dep for a gig. Now, I'm from a punk and metal background. What the hell's a dep, right? And he says, well, what I mean is I need you to sub in for my singer. My singer can't do it. And his singer wasn't ideally suited for the music they were playing, but fantastic voice. I know him. I still know him. He's built himself a very strong career singing in probably one of the more popular covers bands in Warwickshire and the surrounding area, but he wasn't really a blues man. And I said, look, dude, I can't, that's not it's music that I listen to. I mean, I grew up going to blues and jazz festivals, and I was a massive Stevie Ray Vaughan fan when I was a teenager. But I never thought it was music that I was supposed to sing. Partially because I was a big old stupid looking white kid with a mullet back in the old days, from the suburbs. and from the west side of Chicago. And he says, no, trust me, you can do it. And so he came over. At the time, my first wife and I were living in Stratford, and we had a piano. So he does the whole thing. You know, it's like a movie scene, flips open the lid and, you know, stretches out and he's like, right, we're going to do Let the Good Times Roll, Ray Charles. And I'm like, yeah, I can't sing that. He says, come on, you can do it. And he goes, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah. And he said, come on. He goes, da-da-da-da-da. Hey, everybody. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And he does it, da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, look, mate, I wouldn't have asked you if I didn't know you can do this. And he said it to me, and it resonates to me today. He says, you grew up in Chicago. This stuff is in your DNA. You just have to rediscover it. And I was like, okay. I took a deep breath, and he goes, da-da-da-da. And I go, hey, like that. And he goes, that's it, that note. And I had a week to prepare a whole bunch of songs that I had heard when I was a kid, but, you know, I never really paid attention to. A mix of sort of Wynonie Harris jump blues and Rat Pack swing stuff and Louis Jordan and this, that, and the other thing. About 3 or 4 gigs or 3 or 4 songs in, he pulls me over to the keyboard and he says, I didn't want you as a dep. I want you to front this band. I want you to put in place all the advice that you said I should follow. The two of us, let's go. Let's conquer the world, kind of thing. And we went from that to we were playing gigs with King Pleasure, bands like King Pleasure and the Biscuit Boys. We played Upton a couple of years in a row, back in when he used to have the Under the Bridge stage. You know, so guys who I had seen like Mike Sanchez and things like that were walking past me, and I'm like, I'm usually the guy standing behind him making sure nobody touches him, and now here I am on stage. And it just worked because it was that, as you say, where the hell does punk come in with jazz and blues? But if you're in a jazz club and you're jumping up on the bar demanding that people dance, they remember it. And that sort of hell-bent for, we're going to make your backside move, whether you want it to or not, and that's one of my favorite sort of styles, that Chicago sound, where it's got that wiggle, it's got that move, it's got it underneath, you know. It was a kind of, the band, the Dr. Teeth Big Band, was a melding of a few older guys who had played in pub bands and things like that, the kind of, I guess, the Chaz and Dave elements, rock and roll guys, and then had the other half, the 4 other guys, were all Birmingham Conservatoire jazzers. So, you know, proper pedigree. The horn charts were ridiculous. And then caught in the middle, both age-wise and in terms of taste, was me. Because I had listened, you know, I grew up listening to jazz and blues. I listened to a lot of Coltrane and stuff like that. I knew all the stuff we were trying to do, but also had been living in the States with the swing, the swing revival in the 90s, where, you know, you had a band going out on a Wednesday night making $6,000 kind of stuff. So we melded that together. And it really, really worked, and really, really worked when everybody was committed to it, and played some great gigs, and, you know, played all over Europe and the States and the UK here, and then eventually, because of a number of things, once we got to the point where we played the Olympics, we played Super Saturday or Golden Saturday on the Hyde Park stage, so, you know, 1,000 people and Jessica Ennis running behind me, which is a great image, and all this stuff going on, and, you know, golf carts taking us back and forth and the whole thing. And I said, fellas, it's been a good run, but, you know, it's been 10, 11 years. It's never going to get better than this. And by that point, I was running the band, and my teaching career was growing, and I kind of started to figure out what I wanted to do with that. I said, look, you know, we can keep playing for diminishing returns and diminishing gig fees, you know, but we've released an album. We put out a couple of albums, but we released an album on a label. You know, we've played with these people. You know, I shared the same stage as Oscar Brown Jr., which to my dad, that's like this, you can't go further than that. So we're gonna have to start winding it down. And as that wound down, that's when things started to pick up for me on the festival side in terms of presenting the Upton Blues Festival, eventually become a music director for that, a couple other festivals, presenting those and booking the bands for those as well. And it kind of, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. As that sort of diminished, then the business or promotion side, I guess, kind of took off.
Right. Okay. And do you miss that?
The gigging?
Yeah, the band.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, there was a point when, before, you know, the business elements kind of and the mistakes kind of catch up with you. Before that, there was a point where, honest to God, Tommy, I would throw down with anybody. I would put that band up against anybody. It was just the perfect sort of irreverence and naughtiness, but musicality, but kind of you know, movement and sound and sweat and show and all of that, and improvisation and all of that around it. It was just, there was a point probably about 2004, 2005 where I would have put us up against anybody. And I miss that. I miss being that good. But I also, you know, given it's lockdown, I miss the camaraderie and the interaction with an audience, as you know, as a front man yourself, almost as much as the feedback to me. In fact, the feedback to me has become far less important. The reason why the festival work that I do, part of the reason why is because I get to hear some totally rocking bands. And that's, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, I'm listening to 42 bands. What are you doing? You know what I mean? So it's kind of brought me back to the fandom side a little bit, where I'm not constantly, you know, trying to find a depth for a saxophone player in Middlesex on a Wednesday. Instead, you can kind of enjoy it a little bit more because you don't have that added pressure of running the business and running the band, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you followed the path then of the teaching.
Yeah, I mean, right after I got my first vice principal role, I keep bringing up Springsteen, but it was 2013, and my wife took me and my best mate and his wife to see Springsteen at the Rico in Coventry. And it was literally like the good Lord reaching down and tapping me on the shoulder and said, "You see that? Now that's a rock star." And see all those things that he does. Yes, that's why you do a lot of those things when you're on stage. But it was a real epiphany for me. It was during the song Bobby Jean. I just got really emotional. I don't know why. And I realized that the Lord made Bruce Springsteen to be Bruce Springsteen. The Lord made me to try and help as many kids as possible. And music got me there and keeps me going and helps me to do that job better. But it was a real eye-opener of that's what a rhythm and blues man looks like. That's run its course for you. Now it's time to do something, or to put all that energy you're putting into again, all that energy you're putting into getting a gig at the Jam House. Well, what if you were doing that trying to save a kid? And that hasn't diminished my love for the music and performing. In fact, it's probably made it, you savor it more now that it's not 4 or 5 nights a week plus running a day job. As you must know, you know, that ebb and flow and push and pull can be wearing. And I've got it now where going to see a gig, putting on a festival, playing a gig is salvation. It's stress release. It's a break, which is what it used to be when I was a kid.
So you're more into the promotion, putting stuff on.
Yeah, I mean, there is work to do in terms of the Upton Blues Festival, in terms of where we go next, because it's gotten so big. And when I started with it, well, I started as a performer, and then was asked to host, and then asked to join the committee, and then kind of there was never any plan to be involved hugely with running it. It just became something because I'm so passionate about that music and because I'm so passionate about that festival. It just kind of made sense. And I think it'll be very interesting when and if the pandemic resolves itself into whatever the new normal is. What does that mean for new bands? What does that mean for new festivals? What does that mean for bands on the circuit? And what part can I play in that? And what part can Upton in particular play in that for the rhythm and blues circuit? That's going to be very interesting to see how that all pans out. But I still have faith that it is going to pan out in one way or another, and we'll move forward with it. I'm excited to see how we do it.
What's your role with Upton Blues Festival then? It's musical director?
Yes. So I originally I would either play a gig with Dr. Teeth or do some education work for them. And then about 10 years ago, I started hosting the two outdoor main stages, which are now the Riverside and the Big Top, but the Big Top has been called so many different things over the years. It's the one on the rugby pitch. So I, for a few years, was literally, it's the only exercise I got all year, was running back and forth between the two stages, introducing the band and then taking them off stage, but also running the workshops for school kids from across the Midlands. And then was asked to join the committee that booked the bands, but Oliver Carpenter, the chairman, was kind of in charge of that. And then the committee evolved and changed as Oliver stepped down. So you got to have somebody who makes the final decision, even in the committee. So when we sat down and discussed it, Graham and Chris, the vice chair, myself they said, well, look, you know a lot of these guys anyway. How about you're the musical director, we're the band booking committee, and we go from there. So that's been the structure for the last 3 years, which means for the two main stages, I secure and book all the bands. And then quite often I'll do a set on the acoustic stage that Trevor Steger runs. And then in terms of education, Jay Riley, who used to play saxophone and keyboards in the Dr. Teeth Big Band, is one of my best friends. He runs the education wing. And he's been brought in to take that over and expand that. So because Upton is a charity and it's a free festival, there's usually around 15, 20, 25 grand that goes to educational projects and blues awareness raising, as well as to the community of Upton and the school kids of Upton as well. So it's moved from, I played there, as I said, I played there under the stage in 2004, got out of the car and went, holy crap, this is like Chicago. I remember, because you were walking, you could feel the vibration of the bass, and this was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You could smell the barbecue, and there were like 6 bands playing, and you could look around and see them in the distance, and I was like, oh yeah, this is home. And so it's organically become part of my life, which is fantastic.
How's the camping time with that? Is that dealt with you guys, or is that a separate?
The camping?
Yeah, with the Upton.
Oh, dude, Steiny don't camp. It does not go well when this man camps.
No, I mean the business.
There is an
camping.
official, there is an official campsite for the festival, which is one of the main sources of income.
Yeah, and that goes into the festival, does it?
It goes into the festival, and then any profit is churned back as there's a charitable arm of the festival that has its own charter and website and whatnot, and folks can apply through that.
Right. Okay. And what charities is it? Is it a few or
that it supports?
Yeah.
I think there were 10 that were awarded anywhere from 500 to a couple of grand this year. I attempted I applied with my school and was told, no, you work for the festival. That can be a conflict of interest. So like, oh man, come on. It was very polite email, very detailed email. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the actual festival, the cut through between the two stages goes through a playground, and that playground was actually rebuilt with funding from the Upton Blues Festival. So there's various things like that. There's also an instrument donation scheme to redistribute used instruments to kids who don't have one to play at home, or to schools that don't have the funding for, you know, acoustic guitars or whatever. I think there's a banjo in storage at the moment and things like that. So that's been a nice way for people to contribute. And Chris Cutting, who as Graham Bunn became chair of the festival, Chris has moved his way up into vice chair. And one of Chris's big things is every band that plays, he makes sure in the paperwork that they get, and if he gets to chat with them, he talks about the charitable aim of what we're trying to do with the festival as well. So that's the education wing and the charity wing, as the festival has grown, have become more prominent.
And I don't suppose you know what's happening next year with the festival yet? Do you know when do you make a decision about next year?
Well, we are meeting in November virtually. I have attempted to burn some sage, sacrifice a few virgins, etc., to the gods that may be, but it's all on hold, as you know, because Trafficker are playing. What we've literally tried as much as possible to lift everything and move it to next year, but there will be a sort of dead switch date, probably in the spring, that we'll have to make a decision as to whether we're going to try it or not. A couple of festivals of a similar ilk tried to hang on, and it got a little messy in terms of refunds and things like that. And it's just, I mean, it's ugly. It's sad. So many people that Upton and festivals like us have become part of their year, you know. And musicians, it's become part of this is part of our bread and butter. We do, you know, we play on the, as you've done, we play on the boat, and then we do this and we do that, and that's that weekend every year. So I guess watch this space and see how we go.
So onwards, then you started an academy. For well, I've got an AP school for students at risk of permanent exclusion.
Yeah. So the easy way to explain it is that Solihull, which is what we're called Solihull Academy. Solihull is the per capita is the wealthiest borough in the West Midlands in terms of income. What that masks is a real disparity from different areas. And it also masks the fact that previously in 2016, 17, Solihull secondary schools permanently excluded 90% more students than the rest of the country. So we were in the bottom 10% for kids being kicked out permanently. Now, from my quasi-religious upbringing, that's a sin. From my time working on the doors, that's a crime, punishable crime. How can that be? So the local authority and some head teachers put together this idea of opening a school to try and change that. And when I got the job to run that school and open that school, took that even further to be as progressive and therapeutic, but also academically ambitious as possible, because, you know, there's no one reason why a kid is in danger of disengaging or being kicked out of school. There's any number of reasons. The common denominator is the vast majority of those kids just need a chance and something different, because running a mainstream school in Solihull is hard enough in terms of funding, in terms of the size of schools and the ask, that some kids are bound to fall through the cracks. So our view is to try and give those kids a chance to change their future. And given my American ridiculousness, we talk like that all the time about making a difference, changing your future. Let's go to work. I quote Hill Street Blues. Yeah. Let's be careful out there. Look after each other, all that stuff. And we do it every day because, there are far too many kids in this country who are excluded or permanently excluded from school. And then those doors are closed to them. And there are only certain pathways left. And that's not what education's supposed to be. Education's supposed to be a door opener. It ain't supposed to be closing the doors,
What age group are we talking?
At the moment, we are age 13 to 16. We are looking at expanding that down to age 11, so years 7 to 11. At the moment, we're years 9 to 11 because there's still a need.
So what are you following? You're sort of mixing it up with normal lessons with other stuff like music, I guess. And
oh, music's a normal lesson. Come on now. We have quite an individualized menu depending on what a student needs. And every kid that comes and sits down with me, because I interview the student and the parent or carer and the homeschool before we even start working on trying to get them a place. And I say, I don't care what's happened before. We don't care. What we need to know is how hard are you willing to work for what you want? So what do you want and what are you willing to do if we give you a chance? Again, a lot of people look at you and like, is this guy serious? But that's the way we work. There's a smiley face on my face now. I don't know why. Oh, it's gone now. Quite often I channel my grandmother with these things and Stephen, this isn't working. So apologies. So we do English and English literature. We do maths, science. We run 6 different science qualifications. We run humanities, history and geography. We run BTech sport, BTech health and social care, BTech art and BTech media. And then we run a creative carousel in year 9, which is musical theater, music, drama, and then creation. So it's kind of design, technology, engineering, etc. And the way we set up is if enough students then say, well, I'd really like to do music or music tech as a GCSE, we'll find a way to do that. We work with Solihull Music Service and things like that. If enough students say we want to do drama or performing arts, then we can do that. And we've managed to recruit staff who have the flexibility to be able to offer that. But basically, the difference that we're trying to make is, right, we're not worried about you getting 15 GCSEs and competing like that. We're worried about what do you want for your future? What do you want to do? What skills do you want to have? Okay, based on that, here's what we need to focus on. So by not focusing on results and league tables and things like that, because for alternative provision schools, we're not judged in that way. We've actually been able to pull off some pretty miraculous exam results and academic progress for our students by not winding them up about that, by focusing on why do I have to, I had a kid last week, hey, Mr. Steinhaus, sir, I'm like, yeah. And he says, I don't want to go to English. Now, he doesn't sound like this, obviously, but I can't do the Midlands accent. The Brummie accent is far beyond me, Tommy. You wouldn't want to hear it. So I'm like, I know you don't want to go to English. How can I help? And he says, well, I know I should go to English. And I said, yeah. And he said, can you explain to me again why I should go to English? Honest to God. So we're standing in the corridor and I'm talking about, right, so if you get your pass in English, then you'll never have to do English again. When you go to college, you can do a level 3 apprenticeship or a level 3 course or whatnot. And when all your mates have finished the work that they're doing for the day and they get to go play football or go to the pub, you won't have to go and do English again. And he's going, oh, yeah, that's right. He said, that's right. So I don't have to do it again. Yeah, that's why I just needed to you just needed to remind me why. And he ran off in the lesson. So by tackling those questions head on. Why the hell do I need to learn about the history of medicine in the 1800s? Well, because this, and this. This is how it's relevant to what you've learned already. This is how it's relevant to what you're going to learn in the future. This is how it's relevant to you in the real world. And this is how it's relevant to the career pathway that you want. Psychologically, it just tweaks it just a little bit. So our students realize we're on their side and we're working to put a pathway together that's going to get them there, that if they had stayed at their home school or if they had been permanently excluded, that pathway wouldn't exist.
Who are the top 5 inspirational people that have made you who you are today?
Okay. I would say, first of all, and I'm going to count them as one, my parents.
Yep.
Because what I didn't know was before my mom became ultra religious, she was a massive music fan, big into 50s rock and roll, huge Elvis Presley fan. But also what I didn't know is that, or I didn't realize, because my mom passed when I was 22, is that she started a school.
Right.
She started what would you call it in this country? A nursery, a preschool. She started a school, and I didn't realize this. She wrote the song that went with the school. So, you know, it's buried back in the deep and distance Steinhaus and Marasco past is everything that I am now 47 years later. And my old man, you know, loved music. He loved his job. He would always say, when people ask him, what do you teach? He'd say, I teach children. Because it doesn't matter what subject I teach. He was a physics teacher, mainly. But his job was, in his view, his job was to change kids' futures. So certainly they've been a massive influence on the work that I do and the things that I love. And music being foremost, because they met the first day of high school. They were in the same form for 4 years. And that was their courtship, was late 50s, early 60s, you know, rock and roll, soul music, the whole thing. So that's certainly a huge influence. Henry Rollins, from the punk background, the Henry Rollins approach to life is that I don't have nearly as much talent as you, but I will outwork you. I will out learn you, and I will outlive you. Is a hell of a way of moving forward. So he's been a huge influence as well. And I think for me, going back to Stevie Ray Vaughan, actually, the story of Stevie Ray Vaughan, the story of redemption, only to be cut short, you know, at the age of, what was he, 38? And the pure, unadulterated joy with which he played an instrument and performed, despite the massive technique that he had going on. I mean, I was at Alpine Valley the weekend that Stevie Ray died. And I remember the jam session, and I was literally crying with joy because Jeff Healey was in, and they had 2 dudes from the security team whose job was to make sure Jeff Healey didn't fall off the stage, because he jumps out of his chair, he's flailing around, everybody's going, and you're going, yeah, that's it. When people ask you, why do you love music? Why do you love blues music? That ability to lose yourself in that, and to give every single ounce, kind of like a Henry Rollins performance as well, but that combined with the sheer artistry that Stevie worked for, and the ability to grapple with his demons and come out on top. Stevie's a huge influence on my life. I don't write his initials on my shoes anymore like I used to when I was, you know, sort of 15, 16. But he's been a massive influence. And I talk about, I guess, really, there has been the massive change for me moving from performing arts completely into inclusive education. And somebody once said, watching me perform said, you try to involve every single person in what you're doing. And that's how I try to run the school as well. And so there's a gentleman named Dr. Craig Fees who got me involved in a project. Wow, sorry, just lost you there for a second. There we go. Got me involved in a project when I was working as a director of performing arts. Very short version is it was about progressive schools in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s on up that were child focused rather than Borstals or juvenile detention facilities. And he proposed me joining the team and working on that project after seeing me perform. And so he said that you could see in your performance the commitment that you were able to get. Now, I never thought of doing anything in terms of, opening a school or trying to change the way education worked. But again, he saw something in me as a performer that made him think you're the person who can take the stories of these schools, bring them to life on stage. And the goal was to try to change people's minds about what education could be. Interestingly, music, a major subject in all of those schools. But what it did was it changed my view of what education could be and what schooling could be. So Craig's influence on my life has been massive. And then probably lastly, and he'll be shamefaced when I say this, but there's a fellow who does some work with the Upton Blues Festival by the name of Doug Armstrong, who I refer to as the last of the true believers. And he works with Nigel Clark from Dodgy, the 90s indie wonder kids, and they do songwriting workshops and do a lot of work with homeless populations and things like that, but they also do some work for the Upton Blues Festival, working as part of the education program. And again, Doug didn't see something in me. What he saw was, why is this guy working with those kids when these kids need him more, if that makes sense. And he was working a pupil referral unit in Redditch and said, the improvisational drama work that you do and comedy work that you do, can you come and do that with our kids? And so that was my first experience with students in danger of or having been permanently excluded. And again, nobody else was asking me to do stuff like that, but Doug saw it as, these kids need the best. This guy's the best. I'm going to bring him in there. So I think that's 5, or probably 12, or 38.
So cool. What's the first word that comes to mind when I say teacher?
Dad.
Low end.
Shake it.
Voice.
Loud.
Pandemic.
That's what I can give you. Actually, pandemic is family, because living the rock and roll international lifestyle that the Steinhaus clan and that and my wife's family as well. I haven't seen I haven't seen my dad. My dad was supposed to come over this summer and go to Upton for the first time ever. Of course, that was canceled. So maybe the fates were reacting to 3 generations of Steinhaus males being together around electric guitars. It could have been too much for anybody to handle.
What's the hardest hurdle you've had to overcome in music or in the teaching or whatever? And what lesson did you learn from it?
I think for me, particularly as a performer, part of being a performer is you either need to feed on people's reaction to you, or you need to be immune to people's reaction to you and stay focused on what you're trying to create. And I talk all the time to our team at school, is you take the mistakes and you learn from them, but you don't take them personally. When you take the successes and you take those personally. And that's something I've struggled very hard to do. But the biggest hurdle for me is getting my head around, you're going to be the villain in somebody's story, regardless of how you try to live your life. And from blues perspective, when somebody says, oh, that's a shame, that you're already fully booked because we're a great band and we've sent you this, this, and this, and why haven't you booked it? Now, there's no way possible I can book you, even if you are the greatest band in the world, but still, I become the villain in their story, you know? Or when, I'm the guy who has to tell the student, this isn't right, what you're doing, and here's what's going to happen because of it. So you're always going to be the villain in somebody's story, and actually, that's okay. Because as long as I believe in what I'm doing as an artist, as an educator, as a parent, as a husband, as a man, then that's all you can really ask for, because some people, that will never be enough. And that's taken me ages to get my head around. And actually, the pandemic has kind of helped that, because then this is, if I've got somebody in the room, I can win them over. But this means my superpowers of looking like a ridiculous cartoon character and jumping around and trying to get people to share my enthusiasm. I can't do that with a lot of people now because of that distance, and it's made me kind of recalibrate, both as a performer and as an educator as well.
If you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for?
Number 1, I would wish that I could have all my family here with me, or brackets, we all happen to meet on the north side of Oahu in Hawaii for a couple of weeks. That would be number 1. Number 2, I wish somebody with the means could see the unbelievable work that our students are doing and the unbelievable team that we have assembled in terms of our staff, and could come and fund some of the developments that we want to put in place at Solid Hill Academy, because we're already changing the game and changing lives, but some specific targeted infusion of sponsorship for a couple of projects and a couple of building projects could be literally world beating and life changing. So that's probably number 2. And number 3, going back to my original bracketed wish, is a little bit more of that tropical sunshine in this very, very gray country, because flipping that with, I guess my wish would be that every 6 months I could go back home. I could go back to Chicago and see everybody. Because this is my home is Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago, in the western suburbs of Chicago, but it's never going to be my home again. This is my home. The UK and Europe is where I have chosen to stay and raise my family and build my musical career and build my educational career. And that, when that epiphany hit me, Tommy, man, that cut me right in half. I was like, oh man, I'm never going to go back and live in Chicago. I'm never going to go back and live in Hawaii. I'm never going to go back. I wouldn't want to live in California because it's so damn expensive, but I'm never going to, those places are firmly in the past now. It's up to me on how I connect with them, because my life is here. And so every time I perform in Upton, I will make a comment to that. You'll do the whole thing of, you guys are my neighbors now, and all that sort of thing, and lend me some sugar and all that stuff. But it's true. It's absolutely true.
Jumping back to the academy, is there a website that people can look it up on?
Yeah, it's www.sa, like South Africa, .solihull.sch.uk. Apologies for my picture on there, because it's not the savage beauty that you see here. It's quite an awkward photo with I'm not hugely proud of. And also there's a Facebook page. The Twitter feed doesn't give you a heck of a lot, but the Facebook page has weekly, if not daily, updates. There's some videos on there. There's some footage from some of the construction work and vocational work that our kids do and things like that. But yeah, get in touch.
Like I say, I just say here for people listening as well, if they want to contact you rather regarding the festival, to do it through the festival way, not to contact you through the school way.
Yeah, you can do it through the website.
Yeah. Otherwise, people watching it will just start emailing you at the college.
Well, I have had a few,
Yeah.
and that's all right. It lends me a little bit of rock and roll credibility when I'm dealing with trustees and governors and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So what's your favourite book?
My favorite Shakespeare play is Coriolanus, despite the anus part. My favorite book is probably a tie. Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger, just destroyed me when I first read it. I just couldn't believe the artistry of it. I know a lot of people say that. And the only other book that I read that really hit me like that, once you figure it out and see actually what's happening, is probably Sula by Toni Morrison. Again, at university and in when I did my second master's degree in Hawaii, I worked a lot on at that time African American writers and African American female authors, in particular Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and now that I'm not an academic, I tend to read the Jack Reacher series, because if I was in shape and a little younger, I should play Jack Reacher. But but yeah, probably I would say Catcher in the Rye, maybe Of Mice and Men, and Brave New World I'd throw in there, Huxley, and Sula by Toni Morrison.
What about your Desert Island Disc?
One song?
One album?
Oh, I can't. Well, I can give you individual songs. I've got to give you Superstition by Stevie Wonder. Despite the hammering it's taken by so many cover bands throughout its history, I would say that would be number one. The Johnny Winter live version of Highway 61 Revisited would be number two. You can listen to that and hear something different every time you listen to it. I'm going to throw in a little different. Master Builder by Gong, right, for you space rock prog fans out there, I would say is probably in there. What's that, 3? Can I have 2 more?
Sure.
Come on.
Go on, do it.
Actually, Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan would be in there.
Is that your favorite album of his?
No, that's my favorite song. I think because of the resonance it has in terms of what he overcame, I think, oh, hell. What's his last album?
Instep, you're going to say.
Instep, yeah. Instep is probably my favorite, because I know all the words to Instep. Let's put it that way. But Couldn't Stand the Weather, just that sound, that riff, that really, really does it for me.
It's a good album.
And then I've mentioned this to you when we spoke and hastily arranged this little meetup. But the song "Hot Tamale Baby," the Clifton Chenier version and the Marshall Ball version, I've literally got a playlist on Amazon Music that is just every version of "Hot Tamale Baby" that I like, and it just plays in a loop. There's something really pure about that just makes me happy to be alive and thankful for what I've got, that song. So that's my 5.
What's your favorite film of all time?
Ooh. This is going to sound awful, but Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure takes some beating. That's just, what a beautiful movie. What a beautiful sentiment is.
You're looking forward to the second one?
Pardon?
You're looking forward to the second one?
I haven't seen it yet because I wasn't allowed. We had a discussion and we thought, it's not a good idea
to
go
now?
to a cinema. It's not out on demand. It
Right.
was out in the cinemas.
Oh, okay.
But the idea that music can save the world and that just being good to people is the way to live your life, I think that's massive. But To Kill a Mockingbird, the Gregory Peck version, the black and white one, certainly in my top 5.
It's Time to
Kill
Kill's the second one, isn't it? With Samuel Jackson. That's the same sort of story, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's got Matthew McConaughey in it. We don't talk about that. We'll leave that aside. And obviously, being half Italian, The Godfather 1 and 2. We don't talk about Godfather 3. Terrible. Don't want to know about it. That's in there. Yeah, I can talk about music and film. Ask anybody for about 7 years without drawing breath. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, and what about the Jack Reacher films then?
I've watched them. I can watch them. There are scenes that I will watch again and again, but Tom Cruise just is not Jack Reacher. Doesn't do it for me.
Did you see the Netflix version of it as well?
It's not out yet. I know the guy. I don't know him personally, but I know who the actor is, who is going to play the role. I'm interested to see, because he's only played sort of, I've only seen him in sort of comic. I mean, he looks the part. He's a big guy, but I've only seen him in sort of comic roles. So I'll hold judgment on that.
So what next is for you? What you got planned next in life when out of this pandemic?
I am working on some new music, like original music, which I haven't written original stuff in at least 10 years, just as a thing, as opposed to for a particular purpose at the moment, but we'll see how that resolves it. Sort of, if you've read the book Ridley Walker, it's like if Ridley Walker discovered a blues trio playing apocalyptic post-nuclear Holocaust blues-inspired folk music on found instruments. That's kind of my pitch. That's what I got there. But that's just kind of from me. Again, in terms of driving forward and expanding Solid Hill Academy, we are looking at opening a couple additional resource provisions on our site, and looking at, again, as I mentioned earlier, trying to find sponsors to build a sports hall, and to help us convert. We've got a fallow unit that we'd like to convert into classrooms so we can take more students on. So there's a lot of work going on that. And, just post-pandemic will be to see as much of my family as possible, because even though I've lived most of my adult life apart from the Chicago side of my family, this feels different to that. So we're going to have to strategically plan, how do we get FaceTime, not FaceTime like FaceTime, but actual FaceTime and boots on the ground with everybody as we go. And that's going to take some doing, and that's going to take some planning, but that's going to make everything else worth it, I think.
Right, I'll ask you some short fire questions.
Okay.
Just quick fire answers. So Superman or Batman?
Ooh, jeez. Wow, the Hulk.
Comedy or horror?
Oh, comedy.
Okay. Would you text or call?
If I'm not driving, I would text all the time. If I'm driving, I call everybody. So when I'm driving home from work, I'll make 6 or 7 different calls. Just, that's become a thing for me now.
Cookies or cake?
Cookies in cake.
Do you think opposites truly attract?
They either attract or repel. Yeah.
Impulsive or methodical?
A little of both.
Cash or card?
Well, now I don't think we have a choice now. I think it's got to be card. Well, there is this thing I try to explain to people over here, is that in Chicago, a lot of the bars are just a straight bar, and then the hard liquor in front of a mirror and a Budweiser sign. Used to be cigarette machine there and a jukebox there, and you sit down at the bar and you put your money on the bar, and that is your limiting factor. When that money is gone, you go home. And so I've come to realize that's why I always carry cash. It's because of that. And now that I'm not doing that, I don't really need the cash. So I guess I'm card.
Love or money?
Love.
Morning or night?
Night.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee. Black. Nothing else. Just black coffee.
Blues or rock?
Blues.
Electric or acoustic?
Is there a harmonica involved?
Well, that'd be acoustic.
Okay then. Acoustic.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I don't believe in ghosts.
Do you think chemistry is instant or grows with time?
I think there's an instant chemical reaction which can then grow. Given the way that I am and the way that I look, a lot of people have an immediate reaction to me, and sometimes have said later, I really thought you were a jerk the first time I met you, but actually you're okay. So, but there is probably some credibility in that as well.
What do you think people notice most about you when they see you for the first time?
Probably my size. I mean, I'm 6'4", 325 pounds. That's a lot of man, particularly in this country. It's either that or the accent. Because when I go back home, people notice the accent as well. And they're like, where the hell are you from? And I'm like, 2 blocks away from you. And they're like, no, you're not. Because I don't sound like a Chicagoan anymore. I don't even know what I sound like. Most people over here think I'm Canadian. Because I've been here 20 years and the accent has changed significantly. And the vocabulary.
Well, I guess it's when you go home and they think you're Canadian, is the...
Well, no, you try to order a drink at the bar and they're like, you're not from around here, are you? I'm like, yeah, I am. I swear to you, I am.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
Cheers, Stephen. Thumbs up, man.
Good speaking with you. I will. I owe you a beer.
Hey, it's Tommy Allen from TommyAllenMusic.com, and that was Stephen Steinhaus. You can find out more about him and his work at www.sa.solihull.sch.uk. Next week, we have Paul Long, the radio presenter for Blues and Roots Connections, also the keyboard player with Catfish, so come and check that out next Wednesday at 7 p.m. right here on Tommy Allen Music. Please give us a like, hit the subscribe button. Until next week, a word from our director.